Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Totalbiscuit, and I've got a new game to show you right here. We're going to do a bit of a walkthrough with one of the developers. The name of the game is Forged, and it is MMO-style PvP combat, but without the MMO part. So we're going to have a look at the current development build, and it's my pleasure to bring along for the ride, who'll be showing us the game and explaining pretty much everything about it. It's Timothy Alvis, the CTO and COO of Dark Vale Games, the developer of Forge. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we are on the class selection screen, but before we start to go into that and describe the various classes, why don't you, in a nutshell, describe what Forge actually is?
Sure. So what we liked about MMOs was the feel of the characters, the feel of the classes, the fact that you get in and do more than just shoot, 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 kill, kill, kill. What we didn't like is that when we would point one out to each other at the office, we would wait for 6 weeks while they reached max level, and then another few weeks while they ground out some PvP gear, and then we could finally play together, which usually at this point in our lives meant we just didn't play together. We liked the fact that we could get into a first-person shooter and pretty much play instantly. We didn't have to worry about large content patches constantly, kind of coming into balance and retweak things. Things were pretty subtle. But we didn't like that the combat just didn't have that same flavor. It didn't have the same feel. We wanted to be things like Assassins and Pathfinders. So Forge is essentially that. We took all of the things we liked about MMO PvP, the kind of battleground experience, and we stripped out all of the things that prevented us being able to play together. We got rid of gear offering power, that sort of thing. And we took the first-person shell and built the game inside of that. So you're able to jump in, you're able to immediately start playing. Whenever you're finished, you quit, and you have no guilt if you can't show up for a day and a half because you're not falling behind.
All right. Now, before we get started explaining the game and going into detail, showing classes off and actually going into the game and fighting, why don't you tell me why exactly this game is currently on Kickstarter? Because, quite frankly, it looks pretty much done. So what's up with that?
Well, yeah, so, that's one of the interesting things. We looked at how we wanted to sort of introduce the game to everybody. We didn't want to go on Kickstarter without something playable because, unlike a lot of the projects that have been there, we don't have industry names that everybody is going to recognize. We're normally the guys that work quietly behind the scenes 5,000 hours a week, and then the game comes out. At the same time, we wanted to accelerate some of the content and polish that we intend to produce after launch. We wanted to not have to wait until pre-order sales and finally final game sales came in to start that, because essentially we have 2 or 3 months where we're just kind of fine-tuning the game, where we could be producing this content that otherwise is just kind of sitting there waiting. So we decided to go to Kickstarter. It's great in that the cost for us is significantly lower than it usually is at a normal retail outlet. So that lets us actually price the game, even though we're still going to be an indie price eventually. This lets us price the game at a price that we otherwise just couldn't. So people are able to get the game at a cheap price, they get some Kickstarter perks, and it helps us fund the polish and content expansions that are planned after launch.
I think, honestly, at this point, Kickstarter really needs to be renamed, because the amount of projects they're not being Kickstarted so much as they're being kick-ended is fairly large. But, all right, well, we've heard your reasoning for that, so people can make of that what they will. And, of course, they can find more information over on the Kickstarter page, which you'll find in the description below this video. Let's get my game on, shall we? So we've got 5 classes available here. While you were talking, I was showing everyone the various abilities, and I think most of these archetypes will be fairly familiar to people.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Assassin's very assassiny. The Pathfinder is kind of the medium-range kiting class. The Pyromancer is much more the traditional long-range magic damage dealing class. The Shaman is a healer and support. Only 3 of his abilities are really dedicated to healing. The rest are dedicated to some other type of support for the team. And then we have the Warden, which we consistently call a team tank because it's not a tank in that it just hits a little bit more weakly than a regular melee, but it's hard to kill. But that it actually actively works to keep the team alive.
Indeed. I mean, that's the thing that I think a lot of people have to understand about MMO combat, is that the role of a tank in traditional MMOs is more often than not using an aggro mechanic, and that doesn't exist in PvP, so you've got to do a few other things with it to actually make it work. Yeah,
we really changed it to be, you can almost think of it more like a preventative healer. he stops damage coming in rather than
exactly
putting a health bar.
Yeah, essentially putting himself in the way of incoming damage. All right, well, I'm going to pick the Pyromancer because the guys on the channel would be really disappointed if I didn't. Everyone knows that I played a Fire Mage for like 7 years in WoW, so I have a feeling that the Pyromancer sounds like a good idea. Now, I'm seeing starting abilities here. Now, why are these called starting abilities exactly?
We're calling them starting abilities because initially the game is going to give you 9, and you can always only use 9 at one time.
Okay.
However, after launch, we're going to release options for your final 8 abilities that you'll be able to swap out. So let's say that you're the Pyromancer, and instead of having a wall of flame, you would like to have like a flame tornado. It's not more powerful, its use is different, but if you prefer the flame tornado, you swap out your wall of flame for a flame tornado.
Alright, well, I'm going to select my Pyromancer then, and alright, so I'm now in spectator mode, and now I've successfully spawned my character, and everything is wonderful. And I believe you're on the other team.
I am on the other team. I chose a Pathfinder.
All right, fair enough. So I'm gonna try out a few abilities here and see how this works. So I probably need a target, I imagine, for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, we at this stage in alpha, we haven't gone through and done all of the failure VFX. So
okay.
Most of the VFX kick in when you've got a target. What we've done with the reticule is whenever you do have a target, it kind of goes red, and if you successfully hit somebody, it kind of pulses red. So I'm going to find you to be a punching bag for a minute.
By all means. I'm just going to set up a wall of flame right there. There we go. What engine is this currently running on?
This is running on Unreal Engine 3.
Alright. Okay, I see a target right there. I also see your health bar, and folks will have noticed that I was actually able to sprint around as well by holding the shift button, and let's do some damage. Alright, here we go. So needless to say, a hell of a lot of fire is available at this stage.
Yes. Yeah, the Pyromancer, very fire-centric.
Yes, to be expected, I think. Might have actually been good if you picked the Shaman, then at least you could have fixed yourself up before I burn you to death horribly.
Next time I'll pick it.
Indeed. So, if we're currently playing a team deathmatch, what kind of modes can people expect in this game?
We're going to launch with Team Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, what we're calling Capture the Relic, which we've made a few tweaks to the system in that whenever your team is actually trying to cap, a tower spawns randomly on the map, so the map designers can choose these strategic locations. One tower at a time activates. If your team is controlling that tower by a little bit, your captures are worth 2 points. If your team is controlling the tower completely, your captures are worth 3. So rather than going sort of the hockey route of low-scoring games where every goal is amazing, we're going the 12 to 15 cap number and letting you score more often for higher cap count.
Fair enough. Alright, so you've actually got some pretty damn impressive outdoor environments here, I can see that for sure. What kind of map variety are we looking at here? Especially, let's just focus on how many you're looking at for launch.
Sure, at launch we're looking at launching with 4, but 3 are definite.
Okay.
Which you'll see 2 of them. One of them is about to load here in 30 seconds.
Alright, wonderful. And then we can actually try a little bit of fighting rather than just punch bagging. I'm sort of getting the hang of my abilities. Admittedly, it's a bit tough to have 9 thrown at you from the very start.
That was a blinding arrow.
Yeah, I thought it might be. It's like, did the game crash or was that deliberate? All right. So needless to say, being in alpha, it doesn't necessarily give you feedback just yet to tell you what has actually happened.
Yeah, we have to polish up the blind a little bit to make it fade in and fade out. But yeah, when the screen goes completely black, that's definitely that.
All right, new game coming up. Now, I'm holding the right mouse button. It seems to be bringing up some kind of shield icon. What's that all about?
You're able to block an incoming attack once every 10 seconds.
All right, okay. Does the game also happen to have evades, or is it just a case of block?
It's just a case of block. So we don't have any dodge or any other like random mechanics built in.
Okay. Now, I take it both teams are essentially copies of one another.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't want to just call them red and blue, so we have, more lore appropriate, zealous, and devoted, but
sure.
It's not faction limited in any way. So even when we release new factions in the future, you can play on different factions on the same team.
Fair enough. I'm just having a look through, because I'm noticing that my final ability is Pyromancer's Detonate Elemental. I'm trying to find where my elemental actually is.
Yeah, we in the alpha build, we have not enabled the companion abilities yet. We wanted to tighten up some of the animations on those before releasing them.
All right, I'll bear that in mind. All right, well, this is very nice, pretty area, honestly. I mean, it's, you guys using the latest version of the Unreal Engine is certainly helping out in terms of its graphical fidelity. As someone that's used to WoW, it's like, oh, wow, look at this detail. There actually is detail. Yeah, that's rare.
Yeah, it's an actual forest.
Indeed it is. All right, you're up there, are you? Okay. So, these abilities are essentially lock-on, but you have to keep your reticule over the target in order to hit. Is that correct?
Yeah, whenever you click is whenever it decides whether or not you hit. So it's very much like a first-person shooter in that way. The big difference being that we rewrote the targeting system completely for ranged and melee characters so that it felt natural with both.
Fair enough. We can maybe give a try to that at some point. Now, backpedaling in this game, does it slow you down, or is that an okay thing to do?
Backpedaling is an okay thing to do right now. We found that it was, with the fixed camera, kiting was definitely enhanced by being able to backpedal.
Alright, fair enough. So I'm sort of getting the hang of what's going on here. You are... I don't even know what that is, but I don't want to walk into it at this point, so I'm going to try and avoid it.
Fun. Point your camera down to the ground and press R.
Ah. Alright, that's nice. So that's a kind of rocket jump, I suppose.
Yeah, Pyromancer's able to get some vertical air. And you set yourself on fire, so if I hit you, right now you do an AoE pulse.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to try and avoid doing that. I would love to get you in a flame wall there. Now, how do you determine what range things are? Because I tried to cast my flame wall and it cast sort of dead ahead in front of me, but I was aiming further ahead. Is there any kind of indicator that would show me where my ability is supposed to be landing?
Yeah, flame wall is unique in that it has a fixed distance. So we are going to enable some sort of an indicator just before you press it, so it'll be a 2-press system instead of a single. Most other abilities work at whatever range you're able to target.
Makes sense. Now, I can hear some of the comments right now. I know my audience pretty damn well, and so what some of them are going to be saying is, well, MMO combat without the progression, doesn't that essentially defeat the point of the exercise? Because why would I play MMO combat when I could just play Team Fortress 2, which, where you actually have to aim and it's got a great physics engine and things like that? What do you think the advantages of MMO-style combat are? Why do people enjoy it?
Well, for us, I think like Team Fortress 2, we've kept the physics, and because you actually have to aim, even though it might be a little more forgiving than a traditional first-person shooter, they're going to kind of get some of that vibe. But the big thing with the MMO-style combat is that everything you have isn't necessarily just dedicated to damaging an opponent. So you can work together with teammates to do things that you normally can't in a first-person shooter. An example is if I choose, I'll go ahead and use the Pathfinder.
Sure.
The Pathfinder has an ability called Camouflage, and if I go into Camo and target an enemy or an ally and press Camo again, I swap locations with them. So what you can do is a rocket jumping Pyromancer can get up onto a nice perch, and you can either steal that perch from an enemy or have an ally help you get to places you otherwise can't. So I'll do that now. So we just swap locations.
Ah, I see. Yeah, okay, so that's pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. The Assassin has abilities also that you normally would just never see in a first-person shooter. So while we have this sort of framework and the instant action of a first-person shooter, the Assassin can drag you into stealth as an enemy. So they approach you and they activate this ability on you, and you disappear to your teammates. They can't see you, you can't see them, and you disappear to yours. So for the next 5 seconds, the two of you have this shadow version of a map to play together, which I'll do that real quick.
Okay.
And you just miss out on some of that flavor, usually in a first-person shooter. I mean, they're much more focused on you have a shotgun, so now we're in the shadow world together.
All right, so we duel essentially separate to everybody else. That's pretty neat. So other people can't help me. So it's a good way of assassinating.
Right.
Not too shabby at all. All right, now I've got to ask a few other things as well, because I feel that lately it seems like MMO combat has sort of been adapted in order to create MOBA-style games. That we're talking about games with very limited numbers of abilities, games that, of course, clones of Dota initially. And games like this, they're starting to bridge the gap, I think, between MMOs and between Dota style. But the thing that Dota's got above what, say, a game like this would necessarily have is, while you don't have this whole gear grinding progression thing, you do gain gear within the match, and once the match is done, it kind of resets. Are there any plans to add anything that you can buy within the game itself? that just resets after the match is over, or do you just want to keep it purely to what skills you have at the time?
We have one gameplay mode that will have that sort of a mechanic. But for most of the gameplay modes, we're keeping it just at whatever loadout you choose between deaths. So similar to Team Fortress 2, if you don't like the abilities you have active when you come in between deaths, when you select your character, you choose a new loadout of abilities and go in and play then. With the game times usually planned for 15 to 30 minutes in team combat, we think people will spend a lot more time sort of fine-tuning how they're working together as a team for most of those gameplay modes. So
Okay. Are you worried that players might be put off by the lack of progression? I mean, you've explained why the whole progression thing is bad, because it takes ages and it detracts from the skill of the game and it makes it difficult for friends to play together. But it seems like you've gone in completely the opposite direction to the other extreme where there isn't any progression whatsoever. Am I wrong there? Is there something that you're going to be putting in that is progression-based but doesn't actually affect the balance of the game?
Yeah, that's actually the new abilities we discussed. So you see right now you've got a little number 1 with an empty experience bar.
Okay.
We're going to have you level up to it. We're thinking right now the level cap will be 20.
Right.
And that's where you unlock the ability options that aren't power increases.
Okay, right. So it's all side grade stuff.
Yep, all side grade stuff, and it's individual per class. So you'll be able to level them up individually, but the experience you earn goes into a kind of global pool. So you can spend that experience on any of the characters you like, even if you're earning it on a different one.
Sure. We should note, by the way, just based on what I've got on the screen, that obviously the textures have disappeared on the characters at the moment. That's most likely due to
lighting.
Yeah, it's probably due to that. Yeah, it's got issues with the alpha. It is an alpha product, folks. It's not necessarily representative of the final game as it stands. So there you go, and there, right. That's actually resolved it now. I actually noticed that collision detection is involved in this game. So how do you actually envision that changing the way the game's going to be played?
Yeah, so we like the idea of being able to use a tank as a tank, or to use a healthy character to sort of block damage and movement from the enemy team. So because we have things like camo swap, where you trade locations, and we have a lot of vertical movement through the form of like flame burst jumping, or the Shaman Spiritual Burden, having collision allows you to try to set aside an area, but also allow people to use their abilities to kind of get around that. So if you want to get through somebody, you have to kill them.
Makes perfect sense to me. Now, I've got to ask about esports, because this does seem like it would work pretty well in an esports kind of format. It's balanced. It's not about progression or anything along those lines. It is about skill-based combat. So I've got to ask, do you plan on having any support for esports on launch?
On launch, I would say the support is sort of built in the sense that we're treating the balance of abilities very, very seriously. At the same time, we're not putting in a lot of functionality specifically for esports. And we're certainly not looking at the game from a perspective of, esports is our definition for success. We're much more interested in having people really, really enjoy themselves at a variety of skill levels. So every playtest, we normally have people that are, fairly either new to gaming all the way up through people that have played professionally, playing together and making sure that that experience is quite a bit of fun for everybody.
This is fair enough. Now, if I recall correctly, at the start of the game, there was actually a spectator mode in it, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, we do have spectator mode. We do have the usual functionality you would expect for an esports title built in. It's just not something that we're pushing aggressively at the expense of anything else.
All right. Well, that makes sense. At least it's on your mind at any rate. So, all right. I'm a little bit injured. Is there any way for me to get my health back, or do I have to rely on a healer on my team?
Yeah, you have to rely on a healer on your team. We are going to put in shrines into the deathmatch mode only, that you'll be able to get a little bit of a health bump from. But most gameplay modes, you'll rely on a shaman.
All right, fair enough. Well, I think it's probably about time we do some proper dueling and have a look at the different classes. So I guess I'm now currently in the Shadow World. Can I rocket jump away? Yes, I can. I'm sorry, that's great fun. That seriously is absolutely fantastic fun, just being able to fly around the map like that. That's actually reminds me of one of the abilities I really liked in the game called Bloodline Champions, which was the rocket jump on the gunner. What other games were you guys actually influenced by, aside from MMOs? Because I have a feeling that you didn't just look at WoW and War and Aeon and say, all right, we're going to build our game based around these.
Yeah, no, I would say the the primary things that influenced us were a combination of Team Fortress 2, Guild Wars, and World of Warcraft, and probably some Dota 2 and League of Legends. I mean, it was we have guys that are really big fans of the Dota scene, and we have guys that are huge fans, obviously, of MMOs, and we have a few people that played first-person shooters rather competitively. So, kind of if you take a mixture of that, some of the abilities obviously were like, oh, you know, there's this great ability over here that does this. We should tweak Molten Bola, for instance, to be a little bit more like that. So Molten Bola now is instead of it just being a single person, if you can line up 3 enemies and fire the bola, it will drag them backwards into each other and tie them all up. So yeah, the influences were pretty varied. But at the end of the day, it was you know, if you just had to pick 2, it would probably come down to Team Fortress 2 and Guild Wars.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's do a little bit of dueling, shall we? And then we can try and ask some more questions further down the line. Now, the first one, here's a bit of a challenge for you guys. I'm looking for you to try and explain this away, I suppose. There is a game coming out called Guild Wars 2. A lot of people are well aware of it. It is coming out quite soon. It also allows for players to buy the game and instantly play PvP. You can instantly create a level 80 and go do your PvP. So I've got to ask, with that in mind, why Forge? Why would a player decide to go with Forge instead?
I would say one of the first things that'll probably help make the decision is that our cost is actually at an indie price. So while we've spent a lot of effort not having it look like it's an indie title, it's certainly priced as one. The second, when it comes down to gameplay, is just that even with being able to create a max level character in Guild Wars 2 and going into PvP immediately, the game's focus hasn't been solely on PvP. So the abilities often have to be looked at in a variety of instances. It has to be looked at in open world PvP, it has to be looked at in PvE, it has to be looked at in PvP as well. So you end up getting just a little bit less of the flavor that you can get out of a title like this. And just with the camera change alone, being able to treat the camera as a character's eyes, we get to do a lot of things like with Blind Arrow, to where blind doesn't become a disorient, it actually blinds for 3 seconds.
Like that, yes.
Like that.
God damn it. Right. Good answer. Good answer. I like that very much. That was not an easy question to go for, but and I'm just going to get murdered here, aren't I? All right. I'm trying to remember what ability does what here. For the learning curve, how do you intend to actually teach people how to play their characters? Because throwing someone in with 9 abilities from the get-go, that's a pretty tall order for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, and it was one of the things we knew would be a challenge. So the first thing we decided on was your left mouse button, if you come from a first-person shooter background, your left mouse button is going to be your energy regen mechanic, and it will do damage to an enemy if you target them. So if you've come over from, you know, Halo, Call of Duty, Team Fortress 2, and you're used to just you left-click the damage, you'll feel right at home immediately. We're also going to build in little mini tutorials that if you hit escape, for instance, and go to ability settings right now, you'll see we have a list of icons and descriptions with every ability, and adding a little bit of additional info there to kind of show their uses and how they work together. So our hope is that by having the most easy-to-use, endless resource abilities bound to left mouse button, people are going to feel effective right away, because they may be weaker than some of your other abilities, but they are still effective, and it lets you kind of learn the other abilities one at a time.
Fair enough. All right, here, have a Curse of Flame. That could cause you a few problems, I believe, in a 1v1.
Yeah, considering I need to find teammates to alleviate the damage, that hurts a lot.
Thank you for showing me the ability settings. That's given me some ability to kill you, so, you know, I'm very happy about that. Now, line of sight, obviously, is very important in this game, just like in any other PvP title, right?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, as you've seen, we don't want ranged or melee to dominate. So we've built in a variety of areas that open up and close, and I'm dead.
Yep. Line of sighting is a wonderful thing, as any arena player will tell you, and it's very nice when you can throw off a couple of instant spells and then just jump right back in again.
Yeah, and you know, you can keep me out in the open with Bola, and the other thing is everything stacks. So we decided early on that we were going to have a rule to where either nothing stacked or everything stacked. Okay. And it just felt better if everything stacked. So your engulf ability, you're bound to F. As long as you have the resources to put it on, you can just continue to plaster me with it.
Ouch. Unpleasant. Alright, let's try and block the line of sight on that. Now, if I recall correctly, I had a really nice ability on... Where do you go? Yeah. Nope, that missed. Oh, not good, not good. Let's get out of there. Whoa, okay. I'm sorry, R is my new favorite ability. That's just ridiculous. Here's a question. I just saw something in flight and then was able to line of sight that while it was in flight. That actually works.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't, not everything is built off of the hit scan sort of auto target. If it's a projectile-based ability, you can go ahead and fire those projectiles anyway, and if someone runs into them, if they hit that person, that's when they trigger your cooldown. So it's a legitimate projectile. It just so happens that if you're accurate with your aim whenever you click, it will attempt to find the target. But you can still line of sight it. So even if I have it kind of locked on you and you go behind a wall, if the projectile hits the wall, it doesn't go through walls to find you. We also have wall jumping.
Oh.
So you can...
Oh.
Yeah.
That's sweet. Okay.
You can use that to kind of get a little bit of height. And the different classes have slightly different run speeds and jump velocities. So the Assassin on the Capital Siege map, which is only about 20% completed, so I don't have it in the rotation for us this morning. It is a dense urban area which has some 3-story, very thin walkways that if you are the Assassin character, you can chain wall jumps to actually get on the rooftops and walk there.
Well, that's certainly something I haven't seen in many MMOs, and I don't know, the feeling that I'm currently getting, and this is of course for the benefit of the audience, is that it feels familiar from an MMO combat standpoint, but it feels refined as well. Those little parts that annoyed me about MMO combat that break the immersion, like projectiles traveling through walls, so line of sight, it's effective, but not as effective as it is here. The ability to block a projectile as it's flying through the air, timing that's nice, and the way that your character moves, it just generally feels better.
Yeah, we were really nervous. Anytime you start a project like this and you've been in design for like 3 years and you say, okay, we're going to build this game in less than a year. We've got everybody lined up. We have the design lined up. You're always a little terrified that all of the ideas you thought would be great are going to come out terrible. But we spent a lot of time just refining each individual piece. Like we realized about 2 months in that we couldn't rely on the targeting system that was built into the engine. So we completely rewrote it for ranged and melee characters because melee combat just felt awful with the default mechanisms in place. So we actually wrote essentially an action game targeting system in the Unreal Engine for melee. For ranged characters, we improved it so that it was not quite as like per poly precision requirement, but at the same time, you still actually had to aim. So it wasn't just going to randomly let you lock on to people. But yeah, it took a lot of work to kind of get there, but we were pleasantly surprised. I mean, once it all started coming together, sometimes you feel like a fairy kind of runs by and drops a little pixie dust into a project sometimes, and this has made us quite happy.
It feels good, which is surprising. And I think that a lot of the veterans of the channel probably remember when I played Wrath of Heroes, I think it was called, basically the Warhammer Online attempt to do this, and it was not good. It really was not. I hated it, actually. It was just like, I had my doubts looking at this game because I thought, wow, MMO combat without the progression, that sounds terrible, quite frankly. And I'm sometimes very happy to be proved wrong. This is definitely one of those times. The combat just, it feels familiar, but it just feels better, even in an alpha state. So I think, even with some more polish, it's going to end up being much, much better there too. So what are you looking at for release date on this title?
We're going to be releasing in 2012. So we're not exactly sure on a month and day yet.
Okay.
But the beta obviously is going to follow a little bit before that. We're going to be playable at PAX. So if people want to come by, we've got a booth there. We're going to be setting up 10 machines so people can do some land-based 5v5. And yeah, we're working as fast as our fingers can go to get the game into people's hands because, as you said, I think the skepticism is extremely high from games like Wrath of Heroes and Fury that came out and they didn't feel like they were all quite there.
Yeah, that's a very diplomatic thing to say. I'm going to say they sucked because they were really not very good games at all. So, and then of course you've got the big elephant in the room, which is Guild Wars 2, that's going to be sitting around there saying, "Oh yeah, I do this as well and more." So right. I guess you've got to make your core experience better than Guild Wars 2 or provide a better price point. Hopefully both. And that's a tall order, quite frankly.
It is. It is a tall order. They ArenaNet is an amazing studio. I'm a huge fan of Guild Wars. There you are. Huge fan of Guild Wars, but you know, we're hoping that at our price point and the oh, you hit me with Pantera's Kiss. Yeah, at our price point and our focus on combat and just the difference in combat, like there's still a tab-targeted system that people will find something to enjoy at the same time. We're not really looking for them to not play Guild Wars 2 at all. We're hoping that no subscription fee, low price point, people enjoy both.
It does help, certainly. All right, stabby, stabby. I had no idea what I was doing there, but it's like, mash the buttons, figure one out, right? You know, I figured out V is stealth, and I should now, while you're dead and respawning, actually have a look at what they do. Pantera's Kiss. One might say it's a mouth for war.
Yeah, Pantera's Kiss, you hit a target with that, and the intent behind it is we don't like a lot of hard control. So we don't necessarily like to put in a lot of abilities that actually disable another person's
Okay. Yeah.
But this one is one of those mental control, in that if they're pounding away on your healer or your tank or somebody that's vulnerable and you hit them with Pantera's Kiss, they have to either target you and hit you within 5 seconds or they take a big hit. So they can continue to wail away on the guy they're going to kill, or they can switch and target you. But it's
They can make a choice.
Exactly.
That's neat.
A lot of our control abilities kind of work that way, like Curse of Flame. If you have Firestorm on them, that turns them into a mobile AoE, and they have Curse of Flame, they have to decide whether they're going to be generous and take one for the team, or if they're going to make their teammates eat the damage so they don't take any from the curse. And we're pretty sure we know how that'll normally work out. Yes, they are fairly predictable in that regard.
You mentioned LAN earlier, so you're looking for local area network support from launch, or is that just something you're doing for PAX?
Just something we're doing for PAX. We are going to work with a game server provider, so that if you want to, again, very un-MMO-like, despite the persistence and some of the things we're going to put in, if you want to rent a server for Forge, you'll be able to do so. So you'll be able to be admin of your own instance.
Okay, that makes sense. What about modding support, if any?
We want to. That's we're going to take it a step at a time. You know, one of our worries is that if we go too wild at the beginning and let it get out there, then you've got people whose first experience with Forge might not be optimal. So we're looking at how to do the support right, rather than just getting it in there. But certainly, you know, we continue to build the editor in a way that it will be usable by everyone. Ouch. And I just wasted my bola on a disorienting strike. So your T ability, and when you hit me with it, my next attack fails.
Oh, there you go. I have one of those.
Dead. Yeah, if you notice down at your feet, there's a little white arc.
Yeah. What is that?
That's determination. So one thing we wanted to have is, because we're supporting 16 versus 16, even with cooldowns, that's 16 potential stuns if we ever put one on a character.
Yeah.
We didn't want somebody sitting there through 16 consecutive stuns, because you know someone will try to coordinate that.
That's pretty horrendous.
Yeah, so what we've done is we've built in a determination system, and the way that it works is every time you're hit with a stun or a root, anything that takes away your ability to use your character, you know, pretty much completely, it adds a certain amount of points to your determination bar. When that bar fills, you go stun immune for 30 to 45 seconds. So if an entire team did nothing but stand on you and try to stun you, an entire team of 16 people focused on nothing but stuns, you would only be stunned about 8% of the game. So
right.
Normally, we want stuns to be used to interrupt behavior, not to lock somebody out of place so you can kill them.
Indeed, that is highly frustrating, quite frankly, when you see that. And I recall that I'm pretty sure they had to do a lot of that to WoW eventually, because initially with PvP, that was all that was bloody happening, and it was horrible.
Yeah. They ended up doing diminishing returns, you know, separated by... There we go.
Whoa, okay. That's fun. I like the ability to knock people around. I like the fact that there is a lot of verticality designed into these levels.
Yeah, it was one of the things we always felt was kind of missing from an MMO. I mean, they're 3D rendered for sure. Like, obviously, it's a 3D environment. But for the most part, they felt very flat. And whenever you go into a camera system like this, it really opened up some of the vertical space. So most of our maps have 3 tiers built into them. You normally have, like, the more safe, but slightly more safe from things above you, but dangerous underground. And then you have 2 levels otherwise.
Still trying to figure things out at the moment. If a hero is in stealth and you happen to aim in that general direction, what's going to hit it and what isn't?
Everything will hit. So
everything.
Yep. So you're not invulnerable during stealth, and even visibility. If you get too close to somebody, you kind of shimmer like the predator. So
okay.
Stealth, we certainly made it a lot less potent for this type of class. It doesn't give you a damage bonus when you come out. It's meant for you to be able to get close and do the things you need to do, and we keep it on a short cooldown because it's so easy to knock somebody out.
Okay, makes sense.
And
there we go.
Ed.
Stabby. Still, it's a bit difficult to learn all 9 abilities from the start, but as you said, yes. This is an alpha, so the tutorial system is not exactly in yet, so it does make perfect sense. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I suppose I should probably ask you about whether or not you have any intention of going beyond 5 classes at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Like, one of the items that we are talking about when we say content we'd like to accelerate through Kickstarter is that we have 2 classes kind of like ready to go. I mean, ready to pull the trigger and begin content creation for them, and that's the Raptor and the Tinker.
Sure.
The Tinker is going to be our least serious class. The Ravager is going to fill a gap we have right now in melee. We have the hard-hitting kind of trickster melee, but we don't have the I'm going to stand in the middle of everything and fight melee. So those 2 classes are nicely.
Yeah, I just figured that out while you were respawning. It's like, oh, I could do that too. All right.
Yeah, and we have a grand total of 12 classes sort of planned out. So the way we came to that number is we don't want to ever have 2 classes that do the same thing, just slightly differently, because then you end up with the cool class that does this and the class that didn't get all the cool abilities.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So we identified 12 roles that we feel are distinct enough to have completely different gameplay, and we built a class around those roles. So we have 12 planned throughout the life of the product right now, but 2 certainly we could accelerate, pretty quickly.
All right. Well, I think the last thing that I need to say is if people want to check this game out, where do they need to go?
They need to go to www.playforgewar.com. Alternatively, we have some exclusive content right now that we've put up on Kickstarter. They can go to kickstarter.com and search for Forge.
All right. Fantastic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a look at Forge in its current state, bearing in mind, once again, that this is in alpha. If you like the look of it, feel free to go kickstart it. Game's coming out regardless whether or not it gets kickstarted, right? So people shouldn't be panicking about this.
Yeah, it's definitely getting released either way. We're just, we're really hopeful that people will kind of get in and show a little bit of support early, so that way we can get content out to them a little more quickly.
Indeed, and they also get the game cheaper if they support it, so it's a win-win for everybody. All right, folks, there you go. Forge, as brought to you by Dark Vale. If that tickles your fancy, the links are in the description below this video. Timothy, thank you very much for taking the time to show this game today.
Thanks for your time as well.
All right, folks, there you go. Look at Forge. Go check it out. Links in the description once again below this video, just in case you've forgotten the last 20 seconds of gameplay. Totally possible. Oh, God, my face. There you go, folks. I will see you next time.